Okay, good afternoon. It's exactly 2 p.m. in Lagos, Nigeria, and 10 a.m. in Salvador. Ye- Yeah, sorry for that that break. Like I said, it's 2 a.m. in Lagos, Nigeria, while it is 10 a.m. in Salvador, uh, via Brazil. Or if you are calling in from Sao Paulo, it's 10 a.m. Thank you so much to everyone who has made their time to come in for this all important discussion. Like I said in my invitation to several people, that this webinar is providing an opportunity for a dialogue between the cities of Sao Paulo, Salvador, and the city of Lagos to exchange ideas in terms of solving the housing crisis that we all may be experiencing globally. I'd had the privilege of being in Brazil last year, between October and November, spent about 2 months in the lovely city of Bahia, and spent a very short period in Sao Paulo. And it was quite revealing for me, and that has been the bedrock and the foundation of the discussion that we have come to call rooted cities. This is a conversation. Rooted cities is a conversation and series of activities to be explored between cities of the global south in form of knowledge exchange. I haven't been haven't attended being at residency in Brazil, opened up my eyes to see that the countries of the global south should engage in discussions to exchange ideas, particularly in the areas of urban planning and heritage. We, as cities, we share a common history, we share common challenges, and I strongly believe that we should create the avenue to have that knowledge exchange. Definitely, Brazil is not one country that has its own problems all solved. Um, just the same way Nigeria doesn't have has a whole lot of challenges equally. Brazil as a country and Nigeria as a country are both countries that are grappling with one challenge or the other. However, I strongly believe that discussions between these countries, sharing case studies in terms of how to solve urban challenges, is a great one that we should try and explore. And that's why we're having this webinar. This is the second in its series. The first one was looking at Makoko, the sand filling project in the city of Lagos, and trying to get ideas from other cities of the world in terms of how they are responding to that. We're still very much on that project and on that campaign. But today we are looking at the housing crisis and how different cities of the world are trying to intervene, particularly looking at Sao Paulo and Salvador. Without taking much of our time, okay, I'd just like to do a bit of acknowledgement. This webinar is being supported by Erich Ball Stuttgart, the German Green Foundation, who has been a very key supporter of our activities at Rethinking Cities. And also, I'd like to give acknowledgement to the Goethe Institute, Bayer, and KfW based in Germany. There were the two organizations that gave me the privilege of being in Bayer for 2 months and also linking me up with the two different organizations that we have here. So we're just going to open up the discussion. We have three speakers who are going to speak for the next 15 minutes each. Um, And the anchor for that, who is Olasunbolani. She's going to be anchoring that presentation session and Q&A. So without wasting much of our time, I'm going to hand over to Olasunbo in just a couple of minutes. Olasunbo is a trained architect, researcher, and structural practitioner currently pursuing a fully funded doctoral degree in architecture in the Justice and Imagination in the Global Displacements Research Group at the University of Plymouth in the UK, focusing on spatial justice, displacement, and migration. So she's going to be anchoring and introducing our speakers. I'd like to say a big thank you to all our speakers who have made time to be here. Tanya Schofield, thank you for making our time. Emilia, thank you for making our time. And Temilade, thank you so, so much. I had the privilege of being on the same panel with Schofield in Brazil at the Goethe Institute. And today we are having her here. I requested that I'd like to have her speak here in Nigeria. And she said she would make herself available, and she has made herself available today. Thank you so much for making out your time. And Emil from FECA, FICA, thank you so much also for making out time. That's one organization I visited in Sao Paulo. And since my visit, they've been very, very supportive. They shared a whole lot of ideas which we will be looking at later on today. Before I hand over to Olasunbo, I'll just quickly announce that Schofield is going to be giving a presentation in Portuguese, but however, we have a translation. So beneath on the bars, you'll see the translation option. So you can click on it, English to Portuguese. So please get ready to be on that channel immediately. Schofield begins to speak. Let's get onto the channel. There's going to be interpretation on that channel. She's going to be speaking for 15 minutes. Then the next speaker is going to speak for under 15 minutes. Then we'll start having Q&A. I hope I'm clear. Olasunbo, can you unmute yourself? And
absolutely. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How is the UK this morning? This afternoon.
It's pretty warm. It's pretty warm. It's so great that we're having a lot of sunlight, I would say. So everybody's really excited about it, and we just hope that it lasts longer and the rains don't come, even though the rains are great. But I guess we enjoy the sun.
Great.
So good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here, and it is a pleasure to host today's conversation. And I want to implore you to ask questions. I will be looking out for the questions. I already have some questions that I have for our experts today. As Mr. Deji mentioned, we would love to hear from all of your expertise, ranging from your experience in Sao Paulo to Lagos and even beyond as well, that can be adapted or adopted to improve urban development across the Global South. So without any further delay, like he mentioned, we'd have 15 minutes for each speaker. And if you do have questions, I encourage you to please put it in the chat box. I will be looking out for those questions. And once the Q&A session begins, I would raise some of these questions. And perhaps some of these questions might not be addressed during the conversation due to some time constraints. We definitely would look for a way to respond to all of those. So once again, thank you all for joining, and I'm sure you will enjoy today's session. Without any further ado, I would welcome Schofield, who will be talking about urbanizations of slums in Bahia. And she is an architect and an urban planner, currently the president of the Mario Lil Ferrara Foundation. I hope I got that right. Ferrara Foundation in Salvador, Bahia. Over to you, Tanya.
Bom dia aqui
So, good
no
morning.
Brasil, boa tarde
Here in, good afternoon for you here in Nigeria, in London.
It's a huge pleasure to be here in this discussion, in this exchange of experience. And I think that we need to approximate ourselves of our problems and our solutions and our worries. I think that I want to thank, first of all, Deji. I thank everyone. So as I was saying, I think that we still have, and we're still living here in Brazil. And I'm gonna say, particularly here in Salvador, which is the city that I've been. This problem, educational problem and habitational problem here is grave. We still not have the solution. So, because for we to have a solution for the housing crisis is needed for us to have a union and the partnership between the three powers, the city, the state, and the federal government, because we need resources, and is a huge amount of resources. And still, even if we do have those resources, I think that this question we would need years and years, because we have almost not productive past in this area. So I brought to this discussion a specific project that we're working on right now, which is in an occupation that is in an extremely vulnerable situation inside the city. We have outskirts and of the city in living in difficulty in questions of environment and housing. But I've been here since 2013, and we have worked in certain areas. But I'm gonna speak specifically on an area that we're working now, which is here inside of the city between middle-class neighborhoods, which makes this area extremely particular. It's a community where they call themselves Blackfeet, because they have specific stories of problems that they had in the past. So they still have much pride in this name. So I brought some slides, and I'm gonna try to share them so you can understand better my presentation.
Estão vendo?
Can you see it?
Yes, we can see.
Eu
We
só
can see.
trouxe aqui o. Estão vendo? Ok. Eu trouxe o mapa de Salvador.
I brought Salvador's map so you can understand. So on morphology, we are a peninsula, and in terms of morphology, we have in one side the Atlantic Ocean, and the other side the All Saints Bahia, which is the second biggest bahia in the world. So the outskirts of our city is in the sea. And we have a extremely accidental topography, which is another big problem. So we can solve some problems in the city, because those occupations of this population that didn't have another alternative, another housing alternative, they install themselves basically in the low areas that flood or in the sides of the mountains. Our population is of 2 million people. This is one of the biggest densities of Brazil. We have 7,000 inhabitants per kilometer square.
esteja urbanizada, desocupada,
99 of
e uma população em
97%
comunidades urbanas, ou seja, em comunidade de baixa
urban
renda,
population.
em
And
comunidades
this
ainda
population
que
in
têm
urban
muita
areas,
ou baixa
in
ou
communities
alta
of urban
escolaridade,
areas,
ou baixo
this
ou
last
alto
data,
risco,
that are
41,33%.
people in extreme
Isso
vulnerability,
significa
it's
que na
a
nossa cidade,
41,
40% da população
83%.
vive
So
ainda,
this signifies that in our
ainda
city,
em
40% of the
condições,
population lives
diria,
in
não totalmente adequadas. Isso é
not
variável,
adequate
obviamente.
conditions.
Bem,
And of course, this is variable.
bem, essa é a comunidade do Pé Preto.
So
Essa
this
é a
here
situação existente, claro
is
que
the
a gente
community
tá,
of of
já
Blackfeet,
num
Pé
nível
Preto.
pouco mais
This is the situation.
avançado, mas como vocês podem
Now we
ver,
have a
nós
more
temos a
advanced level,
comunidade, essa área
but
aqui,
here we have the community. This
com
area here,
as habitações foram construídas
the
com o que
housing
nós chamamos
was
de restos
built
de material,
with
ou
what we
seja,
call
ou é lona, ou é
remainings of
plástico,
material.
né,
So
ou é resto
plastic
de telha,
and
tem
rest of
pouquíssimas, não
roof of
chegam
other people's
talvez a
houses.
10
So
habitações em alvenaria,
we get to, I
e no
think, 10 brick
entorno
houses,
nós
and
temos
outside of it,
umas
we have
bairros de classe média e
middle
bairro de
class
classe mais
neighborhoods
baixa, mas
and
já consolidado.
low class
Assim,
neighborhoods, but this one is already consolidated.
numa meia encosta,
So
não tem
it's
água encanada, não tem, claro, não tem esgoto, não
it's in
tem
a hill.
arruamento,
They
não
are
tem
in a hill,
acessibilidade,
so there's no water,
né?
there's
Enfim,
no
e a
sewer,
energia
there's no
que eles
accessibility,
têm hoje é
and
uma energia irregular,
the
que eles
energy they have
utilizam
today
uma rede de energia mais
is
próxima,
irregular, that
como a água
they
também, tem
hack
alguns
from a
pontos de
nearby
água onde eles
source of
puxam
energy.
também da rede
And
de água mais
also the
próxima.
water, they also
Só
hack the
para
system
dizer
and
se
take it from a
tiver mais proximidade, é
neighboring
essa comunidade que
water
a gente
source.
está
So it's just
Sorry,
for you
the
to
slide
have
is not
a
changing.
view.
The slide, can you make the slide to
Ok,
change? You shouldn't click on the
entendi.
slide.
Entendi.
Yeah,
Mudou?
the slides. Move the slides.
Entendendo. Então, tô tentando.
She's trying to change it.
Okay.
Mudou?
Yeah, good. Same. Yeah. Same.
Ok?
Same.
Ok. Eu vou trazer uma imagem mais próxima.
So here I'm bringing a closer image.
Acho que para eu mudar, eu tenho que sair. Não, eu estou no. Eu já entendi, eu tenho que sair para voltar. Pronto.
Okay.
Para vocês terem
Okay, she said.
aqui mais próximo
So you can have closer the situation of this community
ocupação.
and of this
Bem,
occupation.
nós entramos aí há
So
cerca de
here
2
we
anos.
started there,
Nós
I
estamos
think, 2
primeiro,
years
a
ago,
gente começa
and
trabalho,
we started first with the work
trabalho com arquitetos e com uma
with
equipe do social
architects
para fazer
in a
primeiro
social
contato com a
team,
comunidade,
so we
fazer
could make
cadastro
a first
físico
contact.
e cadastro
So we
socioeconômico para
register
entender o perfil dessa comunidade em termos
we
de
register
renda,
these
de
people and
composição
like an
familiar,
economic and social register, so we can
da
understand the situation of those
situação
families, the economic
de
situation,
enfim,
the
toda
working
a
situation,
situação socioeconômica da população.
all of the socio-economic
Fazemos
situation of the
inúmeras
population.
reuniões, né,
We make
trazendo
numerous
primeiro momento
meetings
alguns
so we
benefícios,
can
como
bring
implantamos uma
in
escola,
firsthand
inclusive
some benefits for them,
de
like we
nível
implemented a school
de
um,
excelência aqui ao lado, aqui na
of
borda da comunidade, com
in an
também
excellent level
uma
here
arena
nearby the
de esporte e
community,
lazer,
also as
enquanto a gente
a
elaborava
sporting
o
center.
projeto juntamente com
And
eles.
while we
Eu acho
elaborated the
isso que é
project
importante.
alongside them,
Todo o
and this
projeto
I
foi
think is really
discutido
important,
com eles,
all of the
tanto que
project,
num
the
primeiro
entirety of it
momento
was
da
discussed
discussão do
with them.
projeto,
So
eles
in
nos disseram o
first, when
seguinte:
we were
olha, nós
discussing
não
the
queremos
project,
morar
they
em
said, we don't
prédios
want to
de
live in
edifícios,
buildings.
nós queremos nossas casas
We don't want
isoladas,
living buildings. We
dentro
want
da
isolated houses.
terminologia deles, da forma de se expressar. Eles
And in
disseram o
between that
seguinte: eu não quero ninguém
terminology,
em cima de
they
mim.
said, I don't want anybody
Então, nós
above
tínhamos que
me.
fazer projeto para
So we had
que
to make a project
abrangesse
that contemplated all of those people that live there, 241 families. 241 families, and that translates to 241 houses. And we had to make it work for those houses to be independent and to meet the necessities that they had. So in the first moment, their needs are basic needs. So they need a proper housing that has water, that has sewer, that has energy, that has accessibility, because I'm gonna run a little bit because I think I only have 5 minutes. And we passed those 2 years closing those questions. So now we have a full project, it's ready, and we retired those families from the area to a social rental. We call it social rental, and because we are starting construction, so they are already there. We took them from the area so we can walk, and we have the social workers accompanying us. So, and still in this social rental, they have this close eye on them from the social workers. So I'm gonna now present to you the project that was approved by them, and that is the project that is already being built. So we could put plus 20 units, but we have a huge demand for them that we can bring from another area that wants to live there. So it's 241 families, but if we are considering for that, which is a medium of people living in each house, in each family, there's another detail that I think it's important to be considered. That is what we call co-housing. So many families cohabitate, and with this project concluded, each one will have their own house. So, and there's also those people that between this time that already are of age and constituted their own families, constructed their own families, and had children. But the project is gonna serve to everyone. What I think is most important, that it was constructed with the community, listening to them, to their needs, with the participation of all of them, and giving them the opportunity for each one to have a voice. And this is rewarding. And what is most rewarding of everything is that in the last meeting, when we presented the project, here is only a general vision, but we have houses with two bedrooms, houses with 3 bedrooms. We have accessibility for people with disabilities and people with age. We have an association so they can have this community association so they can talk and have this space for them. So another place where we're having professionalization for them. And most of those people, they live of recycling. They collect recycle items. So we are also constructing a space so they can have a cooperative. So these people can have a cooperative that already has this living in this activity, and to capacitate others so in education, because most of them have a low degrees in school. And there is another grave situation, which is drug trafficking. So we have factions inside this space, but we have been able to construct an amicable relationship with them because they understand that we are doing a difficult work in the community. So I'm bringing here just a few points that we're working with a perspective that we can take some of those young people from drug trafficking by improving their conditions of housing, by improving and having a perspective of improving of life with school, with capacitation, professional capacitation, and to taking these people off the vulnerable situation that they were living, because in doing that, we change the life expectancy of these people. So as we listened in the meeting where the project was validated and approved, some women, they told us that this was a dream. So, and the dream that they had all their lives, proper housing, is gonna be fulfilled. So they're telling me here that my time is over. So I'm gonna conclude here, and I'm gonna leave the Q&A so we don't pass much of the time. Thank you very much. And I'm gonna always be available. And I think that this that we're doing is extremely important. This interrelation between cities, this exchange of knowledge, because this is how we're going to search for solutions that we might not have thought for ourselves still. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Wow, amazing speech, amazing presentation. Thank you for the time. Thank you for taking us through. As you were speaking, a number of things were coming up. The question of land as a resource comes in. Sometimes when you think about it as well, you think about Maslow's hierarchy of need also comes into play. Then you talk about, you mentioned co-housing, you mentioned recycling, you've mentioned...
Okay, hold on. I think Scofield is finding it difficult to... okay, are we okay there? Tana, are you okay?
Sim,
I
ok.
think she was struggling to hear you.
Sim, ok.
Oh, okay. Oh,
She's
Maria?
listening. She's listening, Deji. She's
Oh,
listening.
okay.
Yes.
I thought that there was a panic there, kind of. Okay,
No, there's not.
Sumba, continue. Thank you.
yes, perfect. Thank you so much. So issues of co-housing, recycling, modes of empowerment are beginning to come up. And I think you touched on it just as you were rounding up as well. Some clandestine issues also coming up as well, and how you could definitely improve not just the state of the environment, but the livelihood and the lifestyle of the people that live there too as well. So based off of that, we'll be moving to hear from Emil Lewinga. He's a financial director and foundation at FICA in Sao Paulo. And today he's going to be presenting some of his work on social housing strategies. And we definitely would love to hear and learn from you, such that we can also apply some of these as well, as Tanya mentioned, and we could definitely address some of these complex problems. Over to you. Thank you.
Hi. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Emil from FICA. Are you hearing me?
Yeah, you're clear, loud and clear.
Okay. I would like to share, let me see if I can share my presentation here. Are you seeing it? Are you seeing the presentation?
We can see it.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. I'm Emil. Okay, I'm one of directors and founders from FICA. FICA in English, it's a very interesting acronym because it means stay. Okay, there is a long name for it, but stay is our mission. Okay. First of all, my presentation is in Portuguese, but I'll translate it online. Why we need to talk about housing? Because as Tanya said before, We have a large deficit in Brazil. We have over 6 million housing deficit in Brazil. This source is Fundação João Pinheiro, which is one of the largest thinking tanks and foundations in Brazil in the housing sector. And all of these 6 million concentrates in families with low incomes. 63% of the families are families conducted by women. 66.3 are Black or Pardo. I don't remember how to say Pardo in English. And what is an inadequate housing? As Tanya said before, a lot of cohabitation, lack of sanitation, energy, etc., and rent that uses more than 30% of the family income, a precarious and insecure localization, and most important, the Brazilian constitutions guarantees the right to housing. So we need to go in this direction, right? Also, in these last years, we really need to talk about climate justice. The people who lives in the streets, the people who lives in communities in slums are the ones who are facing the worst situation in climate change, as we are now facing a situation where the middle class, the rich people, the upper class, we can afford to have air conditioning, we afford to have water, etc. A large part of the Brazilian population, a large part of the global population is facing elevated temperatures. In Brazil, in São Paulo, for instance, in January, you have an average temperature over 3 degrees more than we have in the last year. This is a lot. Okay, and there are a lot of structural challenges in Brazil these days. We have absence of consistent public policies. We have public policies, but if you read the documents, for instance, Fundação TD Setúbal, I'll send the link after the presentation, just finalized a document about social housing in Brazil. The policies are completely different, city by city, state by state, and the general housing policy in Brazil. We have an organized urban growing situation in every country. Tanya also told about this. São Paulo is also a case. We have a lot of gentrification and speculation in terms of assets. São Paulo is a case where the downtown is completely rechanged from one kind of living situation to a different one, where they are trying to construct small apartments for upper middle class and apartments with 30 square meters, 25 square meters, this type of apartments with a cost per meter of over 3 or 4 times the cost that the old buildings in the downtown of São Paulo had in the past. And last but not least, we still have some rural exodus, which means that we still have people from the rural part of Brazil moving from the rural parts to the cities, and a changing in the family profile. As Tanya also mentioned, the families are expanding. So the ones who are getting married, they are looking for new places to live in, and in a city like São Paulo, with 13 to 14 million in the city itself, and over 20 million in the whole region, it's finding good housing is very complicated. So for the majority of the people in São Paulo, to live is to live over 2 or 3 hours from where they work, because the working areas are normally downtown, centralized, etc., and people need to live 2 hours, 40, 50 kilometers from these places. So we are talking about people we have some communities in São Paulo where people spend 5 to 6 hours a day in transportation. Okay, so there is urban policies in Brazil, but it's not enough. Okay, so we have Minha Casa Minha Vida, which is the main program, who has a focus in families who earns up to 8,000 a month, but there is not sufficient. We have some kind of improvement in non-formal assessments and occupation, but it is a very, very, very slow pace policy. Okay, so FICA was founded 10 years ago with this idea of being a kind of lab to provide dignified housing to low-income people. We have 4 programs nowadays. We have a program called Apartments, which is a single-family program with 4 units. We have the Compartilha, which is a program who aims to try to not to solve but to address the question of the cortiças, which are the tenant houses in English. We nowadays have one single building with 10 apartments, where we are trying to let's say all the slums, the tenant houses are normally in São Paulo are in the downtown. So what happened is that they have a very good place to live in terms of localization, but the quality of living is not so good. So they want to stay in this place, but they cannot live in this situation. When we are talking about tenant houses in Brazil, we're talking about 10 units, 10 families sharing a bathroom. Sometimes from these 10 apartments, eight has no windows. Sometimes we're talking about people cooking with gas in these places, which is very dangerous, because normally what happens in these buildings is that people, that when they build the tenant house, they build with wood to divide the apartment. So imagine cooking with gas in a place where the divisions are wood. So we have a lot of fires, etc. Okay, this is the second program. The third program is the Morar Primeiro house, which is based, Morar Primeiro means housing first, which is something that we are copying from a lot of experiences from outside of Brazil, in terms of people providing housing for people who live in the streets. Okay, which means our basic idea, we founded the program with the help of a very famous Brazilian priest called Padre Júlio Lancelotti, who is the priest of the people of the streets in Brazil. He was a very close friend to the Pope, who passed away this week. And with the help of this priest, Padre Júlio, we were able to transfer 90 people, 16 families from below of people who lived under a bridge in São Paulo and they received the expelling note to leave this place in 15 days, or they will be sent to another place. And in 50 days, we were able to buy a building and to give housing to these families. The basic idea of housing first is you give the house first, then you treat all the other questions. Okay. And last but not least, also, we started 2 years ago with the student housing program, because what we found is that even if universities are free or universities have some kinds of programs of discounts, etc., we still have a large group of students that could not afford, they are not able to afford to live near the university, or they really need to share apartments with 5, 6 different students. So we focused on graduate students from University of São Paulo. They pay exactly the rent. The rent is exactly the value of what they receive for a housing allowance from their university. Okay, so with this, we were able to make a proof of contact, also a proof of context, because there are in São Paulo University we have 10,000 students from undergraduate who receive this allowance, but only 1,000 from graduate. So when we have 20 students from graduate students who live with us, we are talking about 2% of the population. This is really statistical significant, okay? And also we have a lab to do some basic researches. I'll skip this part, okay? So we work in two axes. First, the social housing, and then the question of advocacy. And in a country where we have Morar Primeiro, we have Minha Casa Minha Vida, these kinds of programs we really need to advocate to our program. So nowadays, one of our directors, Simone, which is our president, she works more or less 99% of her time with advocacy policies. Our methodology is divided in 3 axes. The management of the building itself, the management of the facilities, and the social management. Okay, we have this axis and all these types of indicators. We are starting this year with a database of the indicators to measure how all these parameters changed during the time with all our tenants. And in terms of kinds of programs that we do outside the built housing, we are doing a lot of women health actions. One thing that is important for us, we have in this time some babies were born in our programs, which for us is very important. Babies that probably will be born in the street, would be born in the street. A part of the baby, the teenagers who live in our apartments were born in the streets, and they never had a former house. One important thing, the average salary from our tenants changed from 200 to 1,200 reais a month in 2 years. For us, this is very important. Okay, we do some other actions. Parties, for instance, for Easter. In FICA, we have a second branch in our association who deal with property, with organic properties, and so we can transfer them. We can give them some organic food. We deal with animals, etc., with their pets. Okay, so this is more or less, this is Padre Julio in the middle of one picture. These are some of the actions that we did. So these are the numbers: 19 people living in our apartments, 12 apartments. We have one new apartment we will start in Northeast, not in Salvador, we will start in Recife in this year. We received the donation of a building, so we will expand our program to Recife. This is some of our properties. And this is some pictures about our advocacy actions. For those who do not live in Brazil, this guy in the left corner down is Senador Suplicy, which is the guy which is in politics He's one of the founders of PT. He's in politics since the 70s. He's one of the most important guys in human rights in Brazil. He's constantly doing initiatives with us. Okay. And this is for today. I received a 1 minute notification. I can thank you very much for hearing me.
Thank you very much, Emil. Thank you for raising key strategies that talk about recentering the social or the society back into housing. You've touched on policy, you've touched on prototyping of houses, you've touched on advocacy, that it's not just putting out these prototypes, but there's a need to sensitize people, and the sensitization happens in the society, happens outside of the society, and sometimes even happens outside of the nation. Fantastic initiatives, I must say, that FICA has managed to put out. And without further ado, I'm sure everybody's excited because the presentations are getting much more insightful. I, for one, am enjoying it, and I hope you are. And without any further ado, we will be moving on to our last but not the least speaker for today, Temilade Gbenga Sheson, who will be talking about the possibilities from Bahia and Sao Paulo. Over to you, Ma.
Thank you, Ma. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'll just begin with a series of caveats. I do not live anywhere near Sao Paulo, Brazil. I live in Lagos, Nigeria, born and bred, schooled, etc. But I suppose I couldn't evade this, DigiCap like harping on me. Oh, your visit to Sao Paulo the other day, what can we learn from it in Lagos? And I agree that it's really important because, for me, this visit was, it's something I can describe as, if not life-changing, I mean, that might seem a bit dramatic, at least perspective altering, right? Because it just gives you a whole new lens and a whole new series of tools like to think through. So it was a 5-day visit, exchange visit, learning visit on this project that I collaborated with JEI, Justice and Empowerment Initiatives based in Lagos as well, and IIED in London. And it was in the context of a broader project to examine how civic media tools can be used to advance housing advocacy in the Global South, so Lagos and Sao Paulo. And from the very beginning, there was this focus on South-South learning. As Deji was saying earlier, it's amazing the treasure trove of knowledge and information that resides there. It's easier to sort of compare yourself with Sao Paulo than it is with
Sorry, Temilade, I think your
Yes.
audio is a bit low. I think some people can't hear you. I can hear you, but it's quite low. Maybe you should raise your voice a bit, and some people are saying they can't even hear you. Can you raise it up a bit?
Okay, I get this a lot of the time. Can you give me a minute? Let's see if we can fix some settings. 1 second, please. Is it better?
Fantastic.
Awesome. Sorry, my mic keeps going back to default settings, which is a bit low. Sorry about that. I'll just reshare. Okay, so I was saying that, the whole South-South learning focus was really big from the beginning. So this was baked into the project as, this sort of exchange visit. It's worth saying that later on, the Sao Paulo team also came to Lagos like a year later to also learn from the work going on in Lagos with regard to housing social movements. So that was really, really cool. So I was saying that it was with JAI and IED. And for me, again, maybe last of my caveats, for me, at this presentation is really about the things that jumped out at me the most. Is by no means like a representative sort of narrative. Emil and Kanye are probably more qualified to sort of do that here, and I think they've done justice to particular initiatives. But for me, coming from Lagos, things that jumped out at me and the things that I feel like, lessons that we should learn from and apply in our work as civil society actors, academics, communities, governments, as well here. So just a couple of 2-3 sort of themes that jumped out at me. So we had quite a bit of outdoors activities like going out, as opposed to brainstorming, in closed rooms. But as you might imagine, it was really the sort of outdoor real life engagements that were most insightful and revelatory. So this picture on the right was, it's a street, a path in a favela, somewhere in São Paulo. And so we visited again with a housing social movement that has been working there, our hosts, UMM. And for me, a big takeaway from here, so this was more or less a case study in situ upgrading. And that's something that we've, in the Lagos context, we've tried to preach that, it's a very large extent to government actors. You have actors like Lasura and co, trying to promote this more in situ approach to upgrading as opposed to wholesale, like kicking people out. And here, just to see it in action, this is just a snapshot again. It's a whole big community. Again, just to say they have had their fair share of challenges, so as earlier speakers were saying, this is not to say that this is inclusive housing paradise. But I think the fact that there is much more room for negotiation between residents of favelas, informal settlements, what have you, and city authorities, where there's quite a bit of give and take, right? A lot of it, over the years, like mediated, just give and take. So very little is like absolute, like, absolutist. There's a lot of the government sort of ceding in a sense, ground, in a literal and metaphorical sense. Sorry, just trying to move this along. And this is another, so this is within the favela as well. It's a, here we call them nylon. So it's a nylon making factory. This is huge, a huge concern, a huge establishment within the favela. And what I found interesting about this place was they use this huge machinery and all of that. And so we asked at some point, what would your light bill, your electricity bill be around here for this sort of operation? And the answer was came back to something like it was almost free, like they were not paying anything. And that wasn't because the government decided to give them a pass or the electricity company decided to give them a pass, but it was tied to this idea that because the place is officially, what our government here would term like illegal, outside of government purview, therefore the government was not, or state authorities, formal authorities, formal private sector, were not like authorized in a sense to collect tariffs or to levy them or for them to pay those formal bills. Which again, like to my Lagos mind, I'm like, okay, how does that even work? But again, just an example of, the sort of negotiated as opposed to outright, confrontational or highly contested, just this idea of crushing less powerful communities, because you have this legal and regulatory power that we see quite a lot here in Lagos. And this is another space within the favela. Again, I thought it was nice. It's a community space. There's a lot of room for community self-determination. At this point, I don't remember quite well, just to say this was way back in December 2023. But this caught my attention because it's like ongoing, the community was sort of collaboratively, doing this and wanting to transform. At this point, they were trying to raise funds to rehabilitate, to renovate the place. But this sort of shared, community project where the citizens, the residents really just took charge, because to a large extent, they had this sense that, they were something approaching, I wouldn't say it's like formal tenure security, but, in terms of just the overall political sort of climate, in the place, allowed them to be more settled in these places. The second thing, and which Emil has spoken very, 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 very in much detail about, is social housing. And here I sort of qualify it with decent. And here I sort of, it's a nod to the SDG reference to decent work. There's all sorts of work, there's all sorts of housing, there's all sorts of social housing. But the fact that we encountered decent housing, where again there are so many models, but this model that we were privy to, that we're part of, was very much led by the housing social movements, including UMM, where from the start you have the low-income groups, basically, and the social movement members basically co-designing the plans, co-constructing. So those are a few of my colleagues whom we went together on the left, and this was a site where we visited. It's relatively like new, okay, or it was new at the time that we went there. So you had, and this is the site for this plan that I just showed, okay. But at the end of the day, you have these kinds of efforts. This is another site, but you had these kinds of efforts eventually getting to like this level. You see the skyline there of São Paulo in the distance. And eventually, you have projects, the one on the left. This is a social housing project. Again, as I said, different models, none of which is like charity. Maybe it's important to discern, to distinguish between. There's a lot of equitable contribution by the housing movement members. They contribute time, labor, some money. Again, the details of those are maybe up to each project, but maybe what's really critical is the agency that the social movements have to negotiate these sorts of arrangements. Also to say it is highly political, so they've been able to gain much more traction, for example, under the Workers' Party that was in power than the previous Conservative Party that was in power before the Workers' Party. So again, it's sort of also not that straightforward, but just important to understand that agency was important. It was critical. So you have on the left these apartment blocks that I think Emil was sort of referring to earlier, and then you have on the left, on the right rather, even single home occupancy houses, where people built, with the help and the support of government funding. Under this broader social housing pro-poor kind of programs. But what I found interesting with, so the street on the right reminds me of a really important dynamic that I came across, which was that you had part of the party that we were with, the UMM, that's the Social Housing Movement Party, the group. One of them lived here on the street, and she was so actively involved in these new constructions, even though she already had a home of her own. Like, she'd had this home for a long time, for I think over a decade. But the idea that after members have their own home, they continue to not just advocate, but they continue to work, actively, contribute actively to other members, to the broader movement and to making housing available and possible. And that brings me to the third point of the power of social movements. Everything is underpinned by this. The fact that the movements were strong enough, they had agency, they had solidarity. And maybe my last slide, because I believe I'm running out of time. How does all of this, bringing all of it home? So I had to dig up this image on the left because I needed to make a reference to Paulo Freire. He's Brazilian. You can look him up if you haven't come across his work. So it's what's saying, and this is where maybe I draw I started with caveats, maybe to end with caveats to say, while these lessons are important and relevant, maybe they also cannot be translated wholesale. They need to be understood within the context of how far the journey that Brazil has undergone, in terms of just the broader political awareness of people, as well as state investments. So if these kinds of politically conscious, politically enabled, inclusive social housing was happening in Lagos, what would we need? Yes, citizen action, but that citizen action is underpinned by a lot of state investment. This is where we come back to where the state does need to be active. First, in social services, including and especially, I would say, education. So Tanya was talking about how educational levels are low. I guess it depends on your frame of reference, but I think one thing the Lagos team quickly realized in São Paulo was that the level of education of the housing movements that we were encountering was higher, showing higher levels of investment by the state in those social services. And it's when people are aware, critically conscious, educated, are agents of their own change. It is then this people action that underlies the sort of advocacy and the maintenance even of any infrastructure that is provided with the support of the state. I'll stop there because I think my time is up. Maybe questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wow, it's been a buffet of experiences, I would say. And just like our last speaker said, there's so much to learn. As you were about concluding and you made mention to education, I think even for myself, I began to think about maybe what we mean by education, especially in that context. And maybe it's not an issue of education, but more about their inability to maybe read and write or maybe speak English. Because I think, speaking from personal experiences, sometimes when you go into some of these communities, you'd realize that these people can actually tell you what they want. They're very much aware of some of the issues that are going on. However, they most times don't have the opportunity to table some of these requests, or the issue of agency that you also touched on comes into question. So that brings us to the question and answer session of today. And I have been looking at the chat and I found no question, but if you would love to ask any question, please do signify and we definitely will bring you up. But I do have a question for Tanya. And we could definitely start from there and build on that going forward. Mr. DG, I don't know if you have any questions as well, sir. It would be great to also have.
I just want people to rather ask the questions.
Okay, all right. So it would be great to hear from you as well. But yes, as you were speaking, Tanya, you said something about participatory research. And I find that being used quite often as working with the people and not working for the people. And in your case, you made mention of about 241 families, which is quite a substantial number to work with. So I would like to know, how did you do the selection of stakeholders? How did the meetings run? maybe just elaborate a bit more on that.
Okay, I think there's going to give us some interpretation,
Yes.
and she'll.
Is that I interpreted for her? I'm just gonna check if she heard everything correctly.
That's what I think you can interpret for her. Interpret for her, Maria.
Não, obrigada, ouvi. Ouvi
Okay,
sim.
she has listened to the question.
Okay, great.
Não é tão,
So
não é tão simples trabalhar
it's not so
com
simple to work
todos.
with everyone.
É
And
sempre um processo, porque assim, na
it's always a
primeira
process
reunião,
because in the first
não há
meeting,
ainda,
as we
não
didn't
estabeleceu
have,
ainda uma
we still
relação de
didn't have
confiança.
a relationship, a
E assim a
trust
gente começa
relationship.
com
So we
30,
start with
40,
30,
depois eles vão
40,
passando,
and
vão
then
entendendo que o trabalho é um
they
trabalho
pass
sério,
this to the others.
que
They
vai ter
start to understand that this is a serious
né,
work that's
resultados
gonna have results
objetivos,
and
e aí eles
objective
vão
results.
agregando, tanto que nós
And
começamos
then
primeiro
they
num
start
pequeno
to
espaço
come.
de uma,
So we
de uma
started first
igreja,
in a small space
de
of a
uma
church,
igreja, depois nós tivemos que
and
fazer
then
as nossas
we had
reuniões
to
na
start
quadra de esporte
making or meetings
de uma
in
escola,
a
né?
sports
A gente
center of a school.
leva
So
microfone, leva
we
som,
take microphones,
e
we
tem uma
take
outra
a sound
questão que eu acho
system.
que é muito
And there's another
interessante
question
para
that I
você
think that is very interesting for you to understand
a gente leva lanche, porque a grande
difficulties.
maioria,
We
né,
take
tem uma
food, we take snacks because
tem
most
uma
part of them
subnutrição,
has
tem
a
a dificuldade
subnutrition,
de
so
ter
and has the
as
difficulty
três
of having 3
refeições
meals a
por
day.
dia. Então a gente
So
leva lanche
we
mais
take
mais
a more substantial
substancioso, assim, no
meal
sentido de
for them.
e tem uma
And
outra coisa que é interessante,
there's
assim,
another
são mães
thing
que
that
não
is
têm onde
interesting
deixar.
that
A
there are
maioria que
mothers that don't
no primeiro
have
momento são
the
as
most
mulheres,
part of the people
depois
that
os homens
participate in the
começam
beginning is women,
a incorporar o grupo,
and then the
mas elas
men
não têm
start
onde
to
deixar os
arrive,
filhos,
but
porque
they
normalmente
don't
a gente
have where
faz
to leave
as
their
reuniões a
children
partir de 5
because
horas
usually
no
we
final da
start
tarde
those
para
meetings
nós,
at 5 p.m.
conta até que alguns
At
trabalham,
this end of the afternoon because
tem
some
suas
of them work,
atividades, seja
so and have
trabalho
their
formal
activities,
ou informal,
informal or informal
e
work.
eles levam as crianças,
So,
são muitas crianças,
and they
então a
take the
gente tem
children,
que
and
trabalhar
there's a
também
lot
uma
of children.
atividade
So we
paralela
have
com
to
as
work
crianças
also an
para que elas
activity
não
to be
perturbem no
conducted with the
bom
children
sentido,
so they do
as
not
reuniões.
disturb in a good
Então,
sense the
assim,
meetings.
é que eu não
So
trouxe umas fotos, mas a gente tem algumas fotos
we have,
desses
I
encontros,
didn't bring
né,
it
dessas
today, but we
discussões,
have a few
mas
pictures of these
normalmente é
meetings.
assim.
But
E
usually
no
this is
final
how it
das
works.
últimas reuniões,
And
assim, todos
at the
participam,
end
porque todos estão
in the last
acreditando
meetings,
no
everyone
projeto,
participates
né?
because everyone believes in the project.
E
So
isso é que eu acho interessante, porque
this is
assim, a
what I
gente
think it's
brinca
interesting
que
because
tem os
um,
pais, tem
we joke
uma grande
that
parte
there's
são
the
mães, que são
fathers,
mulheres, que são
the
chefes de família,
most part of them
tem
are
o
women that are
companheiro,
chief of their families and do not have a
os homens
partner.
também, tem alguns homens que
And
moram
some
só,
men,
né?
they
Mas
live
eles
alone,
todos participaram.
but all of them
E a gente
participated
brinca o seguinte,
towards the
dizendo
end.
assim, as
And
reuniões
we joke that those
tem os
meetings,
moradores, tem
they have
crianças e tem os animais, porque
the
os
people,
pets,
they have the
né,
children, and
são
they have
levados
the
também para as
pets
reuniões.
because the animals are
É
also
um
taken
todo.
to those meetings
Mas
because
é uma
this
discussão muito
it's
rica, né?
it's
E
a
é
community and it's
uma
a very rich
construção de
discussion
projeto
and it's a
extremamente rica,
very
porque a
rich
gente não olha
construction of
apenas
a
a
project
questão da
because we don't
moradia,
look only
né,
the
das
housing
famílias que vivem
situation
situação de
of families
extrema
that
precariedade
live
e
in
dificuldades,
extremely
inclusive,
vulnerable
porque a grande maioria deles
situations,
não tem
living
residência.
with extremely
E de saúde
financial
também.
challenges that they don't have a fixed income and also health problems.
Até aqui também, lembrando aqui que até a documentação,
And
porque
she's
você
remembering
não
here
tem
because some of them are not
certidão de
registered,
nascimento, e a gente
like they
fez
don't have birth
trabalho
certificates.
junto com
And so
a
we had
Defensoria
to
Pública
conduct a work alongside with
tirar
the
esse
public
documento
defensory
daquelas
so
famílias que
they
não tinham
could
documento.
be documented because they didn't have it.
Yes, thank you very much. I think we can see across the board that a lot of issues are coming up. It's not just about the housing, but there are other issues that come up, issues of gender as well, issues of diverse target groups, issues of safety, issues of socioeconomic strength. And it's a very, very complex issue. So that will take me to my next question. And once I'm done asking that question, I would like for Mr. Emmanuel Adenia to just also pass his comments. And the question goes to Emil Lewinga. You said something about giving the house first and then treating other issues. And I would love for you to explain how the housing allocation happens. And then maybe you could also share a range of all these other issues that the agency or the organization has been able to address. You sort of started touching on it towards the end, especially with regards to women, and that's a gendered approach, which is very, very important, especially in these kinds of settings. So it would be great to hear you speak some more about that, and then we would have Mr. Emmanuel Adenia come up. Then I would read Mr. Bass's comments, and then we would have Hannah Balogun Adebi also share her thoughts. Thank you.
First of all, every program that we have has a different approach to house searching, okay, in some sense. So, for instance, in the case of the Housing First program, we decided to have, it was not such a good decision, but our first decision is to have a single building to have all the people, all the families from this eviction, which we treated in a single place. After some, because this was we needed to do it fast. We had only 15 days. Nowadays, after studying international cases of Housing First, we discovered that much of the cases world around they try to do this approach in small houses, maximum 5 families per building or per house, because what happened is that 99.9% of these families that come from these evictions, they are, as Tanya also said, they are not legalized. They have a lot of questions, and we decide this approach Housing First. The idea is you give a house to them, and then you treat everything else. So in some sense, let's say the architectural team starts first, and then the social team takes account of the rest. So after having these families for 3 or 4 months, we start with papers, health services, schools, etc. Schools for the children, an employment program for the families, because 99% of them live on social bonuses from the government, and so the current situation in Brazil is that most of the programs that deals with street population, they have a completely opposite way of doing. They do a program where they first put the families on a kind of temporary hostel, and then they treat the thing. What happened is that first, this is not the correct way, because if you just you don't start with a fixed house. You put the person in a hostel. What happens is the person the family does not fix itself. They don't have in Brazil. Having an address is one of the most important things to having an electricity bill or a gas bill, because with this you can go to public services, you can go to a bank, you can have a loan, you can have a lot of things. So having an address is important, and a hostel is not an address. And second, also what happened is that the cost of these hostels are at least 10 times our cost. Nowadays, after 3 years, we could do a mathematics of the things, and it's costing us at more or less $500 a month per family to have them in these apartments. And the cost of having these families in hostels is more or less $2,500 to $3,000 a month, because these hostels are are owned by third parties. The third parties has contracts with the organizations who are giving a place to these families to live. So the basic idea is to invert the order of the process in some sense. And the second part of the question, I forgot, excuse me. I'm sorry. What was
No,
the
I think
second
you
part?
have already, no, I think you have already answered it, the process of responding in the process of responding. Thank you so much. Can we have Mr. Emmanuel pass his comment?
Oh, thank you, Madam Olasumba. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Okay, so what I would just like to say from what I've observed from Mr. Emil's comments, Madam Tanya's comments, and also Madam Temilade is that all these regions we are discussing, Bahia, El Salvador, Sao Paulo, and Lagos, each region approaches this housing issue with their own challenges and resources. But what I noticed common across all borders is that they have things of community participation, infrastructural development, and general federal, state, and local interest to secure land tenures and make sure development is accessible and easy for everyone to come into. So that being said, what I've noticed now is in Lagos, being the state I currently reside in, I've noticed that we have social housing schemes already in place. For instance, the Jakonde housing scheme, the Dolphin Estate social housing schemes that were set up long ago. They are still running, but not at the level that they ought to. They've been let to fall to dilapidation and obsolescence. And from what I studied, and from little research also I did, backed up by a book I read by Hernando Del Soto, which studies and talks about the mystery of capital, why capitalism doesn't thrive outside of the West in terms of development and housing. And one of the mysteries he spoke on was on administrative function of the government in how they administer land to the masses, and also the legal aspect of land tenure and administration. If we were to take up good examples, for instance, Dubai, economies like Dubai and China, they've industrialized development to the point that every construction item that goes into development, they found ways to drastically cut down the cost to enable even the unemployed, unlearned, and unequipped Chinese man have the dream and capacity to actually own a home. Unlike in Lagos State, where every development that is being put out there now is just to meet the standard of luxury or to satisfy a particular people, a particular dynamic. If you understand me, no one is caring about developing for those who actually rely and need shelter to continue their day-to-day activities. And for that reason, I believe if we can find ways to industrialize construction, think outside the box when it comes to construction materials, choices that are available to us, just like China does. I think for the most part, if we can look in that direction, over here, we can really achieve a whole lot at reduced cost and at convenience. So that's just what I have to share. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your contribution. I somewhat agree with some parts of what you have mentioned, especially because the majority of the population are actually outside of the target group. I would say that the construction companies or people who are in the built environment target. So if that is inverted and you target the majority, then maybe there would be we will be able to actualize industrializing construction. So we have Hannah Balogun come up, and I would then take all the questions that we have today. So glad they're pouring in, but we are slightly behind time. So if you could share your contributions in 1-2 minutes, Hannah, over to you.
Hannah, you have the floor.
Hello, Hannah, are you there?
Hello? Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I
Yeah.
can hear you. Thank
Okay,
you.
great. All right. So I said I think
Sorry,
it's more of a
Hannah.
question.
Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry, to Bajan. So if you can really also tell us, your own organization is pushing for the low income housing fund. How does this O-learning tie into the low income housing fund that we are advocating for? I can see Andrew had mentioned here to Temilade what my house, my life type social housing fund program in Lagos. What are the learnings from this event and how does it tie to that fund that we're advocating for? We can see that there's a strong government involvement in Brazil in trying to solve the housing issue with that low income group. So bringing it back to Lagos, what are the opportunities that we have? So it's like a question to you, but also maybe, I don't know what you wanted to say, but you can also quickly address that, which I think is the key highlight for us here in this discussion. We can clearly see that the government agency that Scofield represents is making some effort, and Emil on the private sector NGO side, they're doing social housing rent, so much to learn from them. But back to Lagos, what are we going to do? What can we do? So I don't know whether you have a question, but also try and give us an insight into that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Deji. I was actually going to ask a question, but it's good that you have raised that up, so I could just give a brief overview of what we've been doing so far. So I would like to mention that it's quite interesting that most of the challenges that we are facing in Lagos is similar to what is being experienced in Brazil. Just the same way the presenters have described it. In terms of housing, I mean, the whole issue cannot be overflowed. It's still the same thing. The low income and some part of the middle income earners can't necessarily access the formal housing, especially the ones being provided by the government, also in collaboration with some private entities. So what we have been doing is we've come up with a proposal called an Affordable Housing Development Fund, which is like the first of its kind in a way. There are other initiatives that have been put up by the state government in the past, but the major challenge with that is they are not really focusing on the low income earners. The entire framework of the initiatives are not necessarily considering the low income earners and then the vulnerables in the states. So the Affordable Housing Development Fund that we have been working on is to look at how all of these people can be captured within the framework of providing affordable housing for the majority of the people staying in the city, and it will be like a financial process that responds basically to the challenge of housing finance. And then its framework is like mobilizing funding from both the government and the private bodies. And the government would most likely take majority of the responsibility, while the private entities could be that can be gotten from either grants, be gotten from CSRs, philanthropists, and all of that, just to be able to cut down the entire cost of providing housing for the people. So it's still a long process, and we are still at the beginning stage. There's still a whole lot of work that needs to be done. But just like I mentioned earlier, the focus is majorly for the low and middle income groups to have access to affordable housing within the states. So, which is why I was going to ask my question, because I was really curious on the different initiatives that Emil, Tanya, and Temilade had mentioned in their presentation. Perhaps there is something that the government of Brazil is doing that we are not yet doing, or there is something that we could learn from the processes. So how easy is it to get the buy-in of the government of Brazil in the implementation of all of these projects that you have mentioned? Because in Lagos, the power of the government is really of essence. And before you can do anything, you need to get their buy-in 100%. So I want to know how easy it is for you. How did you navigate it to ensure that these initiatives are implemented, and how long did it take? What was the process like for you? Yeah. So that's my major
Thank you
question.
so much. Thank you so much. I don't know if we could take all the questions, but also to Emil, Mr. Bassi is curious to know how he's curious to know how you have managed the issue of multiple policies that limit housing provision across states. In the case of Bahia, how you have managed that. And then he's also curious to know much more about housing financing as well. I think that's what Hannah also just touched on as well. The question is it financed through international development grants? Is it from the government, or it's solely private sector? Then there's also another question that says Sao Paulo's intervention emphasized formalization, infrastructure, and relocation with a heavier reliance on public-private housing production. How can this be easily adopted in Lagos or the targeted parts of Lagos? I want to assume this is directed at Temilade. And question as well to Tanya and Emil is, what is it like engaging the government to support or be part of these initiatives? I think it also just echoes Hannah's questions as well. And I think the final question would be for Temilade, where it says, what do you see as the prospects for a My House, My Life type social housing fund program in Lagos? Thank you.
There's a further follow-up on that same question.
Okay.
Andrew was referencing Lagos, that it was supposed to be government-supported affordable housing scheme. I think that question also is to Temilade. So for the reason of time, we will just try and manage this. I think, Temilade, you have the bulk of the questions.
Yes.
And are you there? Temilade, are you there? Some of them, okay, you are here. So because of time, I want you to address the issues as quickly as possible. So the question around, yeah, we can see formalization. Yeah, Brazil rely on public and private sector housing production. There's a collaboration of some sort by government, and how can we achieve that in Lagos? How can we get the government to be as responsive? Although even when you go to Brazil, people will still tell you that they are not as responsive as what it is. But there's an element of response. I mean, with Scoffield's organization and the intervention, I saw so many things being done by the organization there in Brazil. How can we get the government of Lagos, for instance, to fall into this plan? There is the question around which Emil is supposed to answer, but I'll give my 2 cents. What we need to know is that Brazil has a strong housing movement born out of the Black movement, and there's a strong housing and social housing movement that is very, very strong and tied to its history and the rights to the city by the Black people, which is so we don't have that strength, that housing movement that is so strong like that. So the learning for me is how to strengthen our housing movement, to push their advocacy, because what has really worked is that the Black movement metamorphosing and operating under also the housing movement has really brought a lot of change. and even changing governance, changing government. The present government in Brazil really, really supports this group of people, and that's why we've seen some of these things being done. I just quickly wanted to put that in summary, Temilade. Then we'll just give Scofield and Emil their last word from all the questions. We'll not be able to answer all issues, but Temilade, quickly help us wrap up so that we can finish this in 10 minutes. Then we'll take.
Thanks. It's really good to see the engagement. I mean, I'm not gonna even attempt to address the questions one by one, but maybe just make a few overarching comments. I mean, I would say, Andrew, these questions, you probably can speak to them, yourself. The key, what do we do? Okay. And this is where I start getting frustrated. Again, you say an example of hope, and then you come back down to earth and you say, oh, how do we do it? I would say broad brush, government commitment to inclusive governance and development. There's no way to sugarcoat it. Anna was saying about how the government is central to this, and when we say the government, it doesn't have to be. People look at it in terms of even the government sort of pushes back like, oh, this is not we're not trying to run a charity here. It's why I used the word earlier in my presentation. It's about the government co-producing and co-creating. So in Sao Paulo, by the way, which is like the Lagos, I understood during the visit, it's like the Lagos of Nigeria, where you have a lot of the capital. There's also a lot of, high income, middle income, as we saw from Emil's presentation. And again, I don't know the specifics, but you see this, you get the sense of there being some kind of, if not explicit, at least implicit cross-subsidization, where some of the capital from the moneyed classes is plowed back through the political structures into social housing. And as the just said, a lot of it is tied to the political history. This is why, there's so much to say, too little time to say it. So the reference to Freire was not, again, education in terms of ABC per se. Actually, his theory is around more like adult education. He uses a term which I really like, conscientization, basically awakening people to their own agency and to their own, because that's the starting point, and it doesn't have anything to do with what language you speak. In Nigeria, we tend to do that, but actually the basic idea, it doesn't have anything to do with whether you speak English or Portuguese or Igbo or Yoruba, or none of the above. It's really about you being empowered to know your rights, to demand your rights, to form this. So there's a whole, not just in Brazil, the broader Latin American region, there's much more of this political conscientization over time. We need to build that. There's a question there that says, how do we build that? I don't know that there's a straightforward answer, but I guess civil society, academia here, we have to be conscious to, which many organizations here are doing, to do our best to work with communities, social movements, grassroots movements to capacitate and to help build strength. So yeah, it's that government commitment, and maybe it's really lacking here. Here, I was a bit gratified this morning to sort of see in the headlines, the World Bank, IMF's latest verdict, on countries like Nigeria is, now you need to, because poverty is set to increase by 2027 for Nigeria, now you need to pay attention to inclusive development. And I'm like, we are here because you advised us like otherwise. But even the sort of naysayers, they are recognizing this now, because without it, the economic base is so low that there does need to be a cushion, right? So when I say social services, it's actually the most basic. We're talking good health, affordable education, and then sort of another layer to that is social insurance. So you would have like maybe health insurance and being able to access the services, and then social protection will be the transfers. So last point, I'm going to just to speak to Andrew's point specifically about the My House, My Life. What I can say, I don't know, but what I can say is that Nigeria has tried to do not that program, but Bolsa Familia in Brazil as well, the broader cash transfer program. Nigeria has tried, but the difference between the outcomes and the two is clearly the government commitment to to doing that for the most vulnerable households nationwide is just not as strong as, I had we had a whole department, a whole government ministry go to Brazil for this exchange thing. They came back, they tried to implement. We have something called the National Cash Transfer Office. People may remember around this time, around 2 years ago, thereabouts too, there was this scandal coming out of the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, again showing evidence of corruption in this agency that was supposed to be for empowering the most vulnerable people. You have the lack of commitment, you have corruption, you have. So those things need to be on paper the intent is stated, but a lot more needs to be done on the ground to transfer those into reality.
Yes, and if I could just quickly add something to what you have said, Map, very, very salient points. I think to increase the public pressure on the people who are in office is also very necessary. We have quite a number of people here who have attended this presentation, and if we take the knowledge that we have to our different spheres, I think that is also a great point, a great place to begin to start these conversations and to also endeavor to step outside and step into some of these communities as well on the groundwork and sort of engage in bottom-up urbanism. I think that would be a great way to go as well, and to rethink the whole housing situation, seeing that there's a crisis that is looming, or there's already a crisis, I think. So it's probably just going to get worse in the next few years if nothing is done to manage it. So yes, that would be, I think, my final points. And over to Jael. I don't know if Jael is still on the
yeah,
call.
let's just have the final word from Scofield or Emil.
And yeah, and then over to Jael.
Yeah,
Yes.
just their last word. Then we'll take the last one. Scofield or Emil?
Eu vou ser rápida.
So I'm gonna speak. I'm gonna be brief. Actually, I'm not gonna go into the My House, My Life program. I have a couple of foot behinds with the program. I think this government should have made a revision of the program. I think it was created in a time, basically a program of production of new housing and to increment the civil construction, because doing that, we also increase the country's economy in generating income. So I'm not going to go into that because I have a little bit of a problem with it. But the other question, I think that it was about how the government, what is the governmental participation in this kind of program? So we know that all housing programs that have social interest, and as I say, for this population that has, in some ways, a very, very low income, and so, and this population is the greatest amount of people that lives in vulnerability situations in the great cities. So the funding sometimes has to be 100% from the government, or for the city, from the state, or from the federal government. So we're speaking here of two cities. São Paulo is the wealthiest city of Brazil, is the second biggest of the country. And the city like Salvador, which is a city that has basic revenue of 12 billion per year. So it's like $2.5 billion. $2.5 to $3 billion per year. So this is a poor city with 2 million people. with problems, with social problems that are really, really grave, that come accumulated from decades and decades and decades. So even though we are the first capital of Brazil, we are not a city that lives, we live basically from tourism. So it's fundamental the participation of the federal government in those kind of housing programs because that require a huge amount of funding so we can make it viable. So this one that I presented now, we entered a program and we got kind of 5 million reais, which is $1 million. So the city entered with another portion of it and is totally funded for the people that live there. So they're already gonna enter owners of their own houses. So they do not have to pay anything. So we are talking about an area where we already have registered 214 registered areas that has, we call it social interest areas. So we have this already registered and we have an area for them to do that. So the city does not have a funding to attend bigger programs than that. The program that the city is doing now is the Living Better, which is the improvement of the houses. And this we have a bigger reach. But if we don't have governmental funding, federal governmental funding for all the cities in Brazil that can implement this program and improve the conditions, the living conditions of the people that live there today in these vulnerable conditions. If we don't have this, we are gonna continue discussing the same questions, the same problems, the same issues. And I have my master's in this area. So it's been 25 years working in this area, and I do not see big improvements. The only big improvement we have today is of the participation of the local communities in this project, the participation, the biggest participation of the social movements. And I would like to raise attention for a matter. Salvador is the second city, the second blackest city in America.
Ou seja, considerando a cidade da África, e a gente tem em Salvador
African cities all over the continent. So, and we have in Salvador huge debt to the Black population. So this is why the social movements here are so strong and creating the demands inside their perspectives, because in those 214 areas, 90% of the population of these areas is Black. And as one of the terms we have here in Brazil, parda, which is a mixed race situation. But basically, we need resources. We need financial resources from the government. And I will also like to thank everyone for participating in this conference, in this webinar, in this discussion. And thank particularly Deji for the invite and for the opportunity for us to bring a little bit of our experiences and hearing a little bit of your experience. I think we should do another meeting, and I really would like to discuss the problems in My House, My Life, because it's a program that it's important but needs revision.
Thank you very much, Scofield. Emil, let's quickly have you in 2-3 minutes. Let's just have your final word.
In 3 minutes. First of all, good news. The government just changed last week the rules of Minha Casa Minha Vida. So in the next year, starting next year, 3% of all the money that goes to Minha Casa Minha Vida will go to Housing First, social housing programs. We are talking about billions and billions of reais, which means that, as Tanya said, we need changes, and we think that this 3% is in some sense, a great volume of money that will help us a lot in changing the program. Okay, we already received calls from some ministers and some secretaries that they would like to have us FICA giving some help to try to format how this money will be applied in the next months, because it's a lot of money and it's not so easy to implement these changes. Second, about financing. It is impossible to deal only with public money, at least in Brazil. The rules to receive public grants are very complicated. They have these, let's say, these lists of requirements of laws, etc. So I would say in Brazil and also in Nigeria, if possible, you need to seek money, you need to try to find money abroad. In our case, FICA grew exponentially with the help of one foundation called the Julius Baer Foundation from Switzerland, from the Banco Julius Baer, who has an initiative called the Wealth Inequality Initiative. I'll put in the chat the link for the Wealth Inequality Initiative. And it's really a very interesting program. And I'll say they give at least 10 grants a year. And nowadays they have some things in, I think maybe, if I'm not wrong, in Togo, maybe. I think this is the nearest place from Nigeria that they probably have an initiative. But we are finalizing our 6th year of grants with them, and it's completely different to have an international grant. They want to have results. You don't need to give them a lot of numbers, spreadsheets, how to say, invoices, or penny by penny, you understand? So this is, in my opinion, one of the most important things to organizations and initiatives that try to seek money. Try to seek large foundations outside, because what they want to have is results, okay? Not a lot of details, which is a difficult part. For instance, in Brazil, we have government money in our organization. It takes 10 times more time to report the results to a government project. It's okay, this is natural, but the private sector is also, because of the ODS, they need nowadays to feel some lacks of results, lacks of things to their reports, and they are urging to NGOs and organizations in general to come to their grants and receive their money to fill our needs, okay, our initiatives.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone for being patient and staying behind. Clearly, I think our goal has been achieved. This one goal was to establish that the concept of government investing, the government and private sector investing in low-income housing models happens across the world. And we can see this example in Brazil. So it is not a thing of wishful thinking by us to say that government should direct funding to these areas, to social housing or inclusive housing or whatever you may want to call it. But that there has to be a deliberate investment. That's what we have seen in Brazil. The government is increasing its spend towards that direction, and planning with the people is something that is doable. We can see the pictures, we can see the projects, we can see the models. So it is not something that we are advocating for that is not being done elsewhere in the world. That's one goal we wanted to establish, and for everyone to be able to reference. And for every one of us that we've not been to Brazil, but we can easily reference with these presentations that we have seen. I saw these things myself. I saw them in both cities, and I found them very interesting. One thing is very clear: government funding is needed, government backing is needed. Also, opportunities exist outside of your country in terms of donor agencies and grants. If there's a clear policy by a government to say we want to do this, to do social housing, that policy creates an opportunity for even international donors or external donors to also come in, and even domestic donors. So it works in both ways. So you are opening up yourself to also opportunities in terms of increasing the money that will come in. If government says, oh, we can't provide all. Another very strong thing that has come out of this meeting definitely is that we need stronger advocacy, stronger housing movements in the city of Lagos. Housing movements in Brazil, for instance, there are also social enterprises that do businesses, empower their people. I think that will also form the basis of our next conversation in terms of how do we strengthen our housing movements, for instance, in the city of Lagos. I'd like to say a big thank you to everyone. I like the final words of Afolabi. He says, comparing the analysis about the favelas, we need recognition, investment, and inclusion. Urban planners, architects, policymakers must begin to see slums not as a problem to erase, but a platform for transformation. I will end with saying a transform for transformation as seen in Brazil. I'd like to thank our anchor for the session, Ola Sumbolani. Thank you so much. You did a fantastic and wonderful job. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'd like to say a big thank you to my assistant, Jael. Thank you for working behind the scene. And Monica HBS, thank you for making this happen. And also to Gotate Bayer, Gotate Nigeria. Gotate Nigeria was also part of my journey to Brazil. KFW in Germany, thank you all. Emil, thank you so much. Caulfield, thank you so much. We'll stay in touch. I keep saying that I keep tracking your work in Brazil, and I'm waiting for that opportunity to share more of your work on the global stage. I like your spirit. I like what you're doing. It's a whole lot of challenge, but I know that you are navigating everything one day at a time. Hopefully see you maybe later this year, if I am able to make it to Brazil, for one thing or the other. Thank you so much, Olasumbo. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Nigeria. Love you guys. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Obrigado.